The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble courtyard of the royal palace. Marcus stood at his post near the grand entrance, his golden armor gleaming in the early light. For 3 years, he had served as one of the king's most trusted guards, never once abandoning his duties. His reputation was spotless, his loyalty unquestioned. The palace buzzed with its usual activity. Servants hurried past carrying trays of food, nobles discussed politics in hushed tones, and merchants waited to present their finest goods to the royal family. Marcus watched it all with trained eyes, alert for any sign of danger or disturbance. That's when he first saw her. Elena moved through the crowd like a ghost, her head down, her steps careful and measured. She wore a simple brown dress that had seen better days, and her dark hair was pulled back in a modest bun. Most people wouldn't have given her a second glance. She looked like just another servant, or perhaps the daughter of a minor court official. But Marcus noticed something others missed. The way she flinched when anyone came too close, the tremor in her hands as she clutched a small basket. The dark circles under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights filled with fear. As she passed his post, their eyes met for just a moment. In that brief instant, Marcus saw something that made his chest tighten with concern. Her brown eyes held a silent plea, a desperate cry for help that she couldn't voice aloud. It was the look of someone trapped, someone who had lost hope but still clung to the possibility that someone, somewhere, might care enough to notice her pain. Then she was gone, disappearing into the maze of corridors that led deeper into the palace. Marcus tried to shake off the feeling that something was terribly wrong. He had duties to perform, a post to maintain. Personal concerns had no place in a royal guard's mind. But throughout the morning, he couldn't forget those eyes. During his brief lunch break, Marcus asked around about the girl. The head cook, a kindly woman named Martha, knew her well. "That's Elena," Martha said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Poor thing works in the kitchen sometimes, cleaning and helping with the simpler tasks. She's been coming around for about 6 months now." "Where does she live?" Marcus asked, trying to sound casual. Martha's expression darkened. "With her stepfather, Lord Aldrich. He took her in when her mother died last year. Lives in that big house just outside the palace grounds." She leaned closer. "Between you and me, I don't think that man treats her well. She always looks so frightened, and I've seen bruises on her arms more than once." Marcus felt anger rising in his chest. Lord Aldrich was known throughout the court as a wealthy but cruel man. He had influence with several nobles and was considered untouchable by most people. If he was hurting Elena, there would be little anyone could do through official channels. "Has anyone reported this?" Marcus asked. Martha shook her head sadly. "Who would believe the word of kitchen servants against a lord? Besides, Elena never complains. She just works quietly and tries to stay out of everyone's way." The rest of Marcus's shift passed slowly. Every time he saw a flash of brown fabric or dark hair, his heart would skip, hoping to catch another glimpse of Elena. He needed to know she was safe, though he couldn't explain why this stranger's welfare had suddenly become so important to him. As evening approached, Marcus finally saw her again. Elena emerged from a side entrance carrying an empty basket, her movements even more careful than before. She seemed to be favoring her left side as if something hurt there. This time, when she passed his post, Marcus made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "Miss," he called out softly, stepping slightly away from his position. Elena froze, fear flashing across her face as she turned to look at him. For a moment, Marcus thought she might run. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I didn't do anything wrong. I was just leaving." The fact that her first instinct was to apologize broke Marcus's heart. "You're not in trouble," he assured her gently. "I just wanted to ask if you're all right." Elena's eyes darted around nervously, as if checking to see who might be watching. "I'm fine," she said quickly, but her voice shook with the lie. "Are you?" Marcus asked quietly, his voice filled with genuine concern. "Because if you need help, if someone is hurting you, I want you to know that you don't have to face it alone." For a moment, Elena's careful mask slipped. Her lip trembled, and tears gathered in her eyes. Marcus could see her internal struggle, the war between her desperate need for help and her fear of making things worse. "I can't," she finally whispered, glancing toward the palace gates. "He'll know. He always knows." Before Marcus could respond, Elena hurried away, practically running toward the gates. Marcus watched her go, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. Every instinct screamed at him to follow her, to protect her, but his duty kept him rooted, in place. That night, as Marcus lay in his quarters, he couldn't sleep. Elena's frightened face haunted his thoughts, along with the memory of those silent, pleading eyes. He had sworn an oath to protect the innocent, to serve justice, and defend those who couldn't defend themselves. Tomorrow, he decided he would find a way to help her, even if it meant risking everything he had worked so hard to build. The next morning brought heavy clouds and the promise of rain. Marcus arrived at his post earlier than usual, hoping to catch sight of Elena before his duties fully consumed his attention. He had spent most of the night planning how he might approach her situation without making things worse. Elena appeared around mid-morning, moving even more carefully than before. This time, Marcus noticed a slight cut on her lower lip and the way she held her right arm close to her body, his jaw clenched with barely controlled anger. When their eyes met again, Elena's expression was different. Instead of just fear, there was something that looked almost like hope, as if his words from the previous day had planted a small seed of possibility in her mind. Marcus waited until the courtyard was relatively empty before approaching her. This time she didn't flee when he stepped toward her. "Elena," he said gently, surprised that he remembered her name from Martha's conversation. "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday." She looked around nervously but didn't run away. "I shouldn't be talking to you," she whispered. "If he finds out—" "He won't find out from me," Marcus promised. "But I need you to understand something. What's happening to you isn't right. No one has the right to hurt you, no matter who they are or what power they hold." Elena's eyes filled with tears, but she quickly wiped them away. "You don't understand," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "He's a lord. He has friends in high places. Even if I spoke out, who would believe me? And even if they did, what could they do? He controls everything in my life." Marcus felt his heart breaking for this brave girl who had been made to feel so powerless. "Tell me about your situation," he said quietly. "Help me understand so I can figure out how to help you." For a moment, Elena seemed to wrestle with herself. Then, as if a dam had burst, the words came pouring out in a rushed whisper. "My mother married him when I was 15, she began. "She thought he would provide for us, give us security. But after she died, everything changed. He said I was ungrateful, that I owed him for the roof over my head and the food I ate. When I didn't show enough appreciation, he would—" She touched her lip unconsciously. "He would remind me of my place." Marcus's hands curled into fists, but he kept his voice calm and encouraging. "Go on." At first, it was just harsh words and the occasional slap. But lately, it's gotten worse. He drinks more now, and when he drinks, his temper becomes unpredictable. "Yesterday, I accidentally dropped a plate while serving his dinner. He said I was clumsy and worthless, and that I needed to learn to be more careful." She gestured vaguely to her injured arm. "This was my lesson." The rain that had been threatening all morning finally began to fall, forcing them to seek shelter under a stone archway. The sound of droplets on the roof above provided cover for their conversation. "Elena," Marcus said, his voice intense with conviction, "this isn't discipline or teaching. This is cruelty, pure and simple. You don't deserve any of this." "But where could I go?" she asked, and Marcus could hear years of desperation in her voice. "I have no money, no family, no skills beyond basic kitchen work. Even if I left, how would I survive? And he's made it clear that if I ever tried to leave, he would find me and bring me back. He knows people in every town within 100 miles. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, thinking. He understood now why Elena felt so trapped. Lord Aldrich had systematically isolated her, made her dependent on him while simultaneously making her life miserable. It was a cruel form of control that many powerful people used to keep others under their thumb. "What if there was a way?" Marcus asked finally. "What if I could help you get somewhere safe? Somewhere he couldn't reach you?" Elena's eyes widened with a mixture of hope and terror. "You would do that? But why? You barely know me." Marcus looked into her eyes, seeing not just her pain but also her strength. Despite everything she had endured, she hadn't given up completely. She was still here, still fighting in her own quiet way. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said simply. "And because I took an oath to protect the innocent. That includes you." Elena was quiet for so long that Marcus began to worry he had pushed too hard, too fast. Finally, she spoke in a voice so soft he had to strain to hear her. "There's something else," she said, "something that makes everything more complicated." Marcus waited patiently for her to continue. "He's been suggesting that I should be more grateful for his kindness, that there are ways I could show my appreciation that would make our relationship more pleasant for both of us." She couldn't meet Marcus's eyes as she spoke. "I've managed to avoid understanding his meaning so far, but he's becoming less subtle. I think he's growing tired of waiting for me to figure it out on my own." A cold rage settled in Marcus's chest. The situation was even worse than he had imagined. Elena wasn't just being physically abused. She was being groomed for something far more sinister. "How long do you think you have?" he asked, his voice tight with controlled anger. "I don't know," Elena admitted. "Maybe a few weeks? He's been drinking more lately, and his patience seems to be running thin. Last night he cornered me in the kitchen and—" She shuddered. "I managed to get away, but barely. Marcus made a decision that would have seemed impossible just 2 days earlier." "Then we don't have time to waste," he said firmly. "I'm going to get you out of there." "But your position," Elena protested. "Your career, your reputation. If anyone finds out you helped me, especially against a lord, you could lose everything." Marcus looked at this brave, frightened girl who was more concerned about his welfare than her own safety, and he knew there was no other choice he could live with. "Some things are more important than a career," he said quietly. "Besides, I have some ideas about how we can do this without destroying my position. But I need you to trust me." Elena studied his face for a long moment, searching for any sign of deception or false promise. Whatever she saw there must have convinced her, because she nodded slowly. "What do you need me to do?" Over the next 3 days, Marcus carefully laid the groundwork for Elena's escape. He couldn't simply abandon his post without raising suspicions, so he needed to be clever about how he helped her. During his off-duty hours, Marcus made discreet inquiries around the palace. He learned that Lord Aldrich was indeed a dangerous man, with a history of cruelty toward those under his power. 2 previous servants had left his household under mysterious circumstances, and both had disappeared from the area entirely. The rumors suggested they had either fled in fear or met with unfortunate accidents. This information only strengthened Marcus's resolve. Elena's situation was even more perilous than he had initially realized. Marcus also discovered something that could work in their favor. His sister Catherine lived in a town called Millbrook, about 3 days' ride north of the capital. She ran a small inn with her husband, and Marcus knew they were good people who would help Elena without asking. Too many questions. Catherine had always told him that if he ever needed anything, he only had to ask. The plan Marcus developed was simple, but risky. During his research, he had learned that Lord Aldrich would be attending a 3-day hunting party with several other nobles, starting the following week. This would give Elena a window of opportunity to leave without being immediately noticed. Marcus would request leave to visit his sick aunt, a story that would give him legitimate reason to be away from his post. During this time, he would help Elena reach Millbrook and get her settled with Catherine. By the time Lord Aldrich returned from his hunting trip, Elena would be gone, and Marcus would be back at his post with no apparent connection to her disappearance. When Marcus explained the plan to Elena during another brief meeting, her reaction was a mixture of hope and terror. "What if he comes looking for me?" she asked, wrapping her arms around herself as if trying to ward off an invisible chill. "Millbrook is far enough away that his immediate influence won't reach there," Marcus explained. "My sister's husband has connections with the local magistrate, who is known to be honest and fair. If Lord Aldrich tries to cause trouble, he'll find it much harder than he expects." Elena nodded slowly, but Marcus could see the doubt in her eyes. "And what about you? Won't people wonder why you took leave right when I disappeared?" Marcus had thought about this too. "Lord Aldrich doesn't know me personally, and I'll make sure we're never seen together. As far as anyone knows, I went to visit family and you simply chose that time to run away. It happens more often than you might think." They spent the rest of their meeting going over details. Elena would pack only the most essential items and hide them where she could retrieve them quickly. On the night of her escape, she would wait until Lord Aldrich was asleep, then slip out and meet Marcus at a predetermined location outside the town. As they prepared to part ways, Elena reached out and touched Marcus's arm gently. "Why are you doing this?" she asked again. "I still don't understand why you're willing to risk so much for someone you barely know." Marcus considered his answer carefully. The truth was, he wasn't entirely sure himself. Something about Elena's quiet strength and the way she had endured so much without losing her essential kindness had touched something deep in his heart. But there was more to it than that. "I've spent 3 years standing guard, watching and protecting," he said finally. "But I've never had the chance to actually save someone who really needed saving. Maybe that sounds selfish, but knowing I could help you and choosing not to would haunt me for the rest of my life." Elena's eyes filled with tears, but this time they seemed to be tears of gratitude rather than fear. "Thank you," she whispered. "Whatever happens, thank you for giving me hope." The days that followed were tense for both of them. Marcus went about his duties with forced normalcy while keeping a careful eye on Elena whenever she appeared in the palace. He noticed that she seemed to be moving with more purpose now, less like a frightened animal and more like someone who had found a reason to keep fighting. Lord Aldrich made several appearances in the palace during those days, and each time Marcus saw him, his anger grew. The man was everything Marcus despised: cruel, entitled, and completely without conscience. He treated servants and lesser nobles with obvious disdain, and there was something predatory in the way his eyes would follow young women. On the second day, Marcus witnessed an incident that confirmed his worst fears about Elena's stepfather. He was standing guard near the main hall when he saw Lord Aldrich speaking with Elena near the kitchen entrance. Even from a distance, Marcus could see the man standing too close, his hand resting on Elena's shoulder in a way that made her visibly uncomfortable. Elena tried to step back, but Lord Aldrich's grip on her shoulder tightened, keeping her in place. He leaned down to whisper something in her ear, and Marcus saw Elena's face go pale with fear and revulsion. Marcus took a step forward before catching himself. Intervening now would only make things worse for Elena and potentially ruin theirs escape plan. Instead, he forced himself to watch as Elena nodded submissively to whatever Lord Aldrich was telling her. When the man finally released her and walked away, Elena stood frozen for a long moment before hurrying toward the kitchens. Marcus saw her wipe tears from her eyes as she disappeared from view. That evening, Marcus requested his leave from the captain of the guard, citing his aunt's sudden illness. The captain, who had always found Marcus to be a reliable and honest soldier, approved the request without question. "Take care of your family," the captain said, clapping Marcus on the shoulder. "We'll manage here for a few days." As Marcus returned to his quarters to prepare for the journey, he felt a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. In 2 days, he would either be helping Elena start a new life of freedom, or they would both be facing consequences he didn't want to imagine. But as he thought about Elena's grateful smile and the way hope had begun to replace despair in her eyes, Marcus knew he would go through with the plan no matter what the cost might be. Some things, he reflected, were worth any risk. The night of Elena's escape arrived with a fierce thunderstorm. Rain lashed against the windows of Lord Aldrich's house as Elena lay in her small bed, listening to the wind howl through the trees. Part of her was grateful for the storm. It would help mask any sounds she might make during her escape, and the terrible weather meant fewer people would be out on the roads to witness her flight. She had barely slept for days, her mind constantly racing through the plan she and Marcus had crafted. Every detail had been rehearsed in her mind dozens of times. Wait until Lord Aldrich was deeply asleep. Retrieve the small bag she had hidden in the garden shed. Meet Marcus at the old oak tree just outside the town limits. From there, they would travel north toward Millbrook and the promise of a new life. Elena had packed only the absolute essentials. A change of clothes, what little money she had managed to save over the months, her mother's silver locket, and a small knife she had taken from the kitchen. The knife made her uncomfortable, but Marcus had insisted she carry some form of protection. Around midnight, Elena heard Lord Aldrich's heavy footsteps in the corridor outside her room. He paused outside her door, and for a terrifying moment she thought he might come in. Instead, she heard him continue to his own chamber at the end of the hall. Soon after, his loud snoring echoed through the house. Elena waited another hour to be absolutely certain he was deeply asleep. The storm continued to rage outside, which both helped and hindered her plans. The noise would cover her movements. But the journey to meet Marcus would be miserable and potentially dangerous. Finally, when she could wait no longer, Elena slipped from her bed and dressed quickly in her darkest clothes. She had practiced this moment so many times that her movements were automatic, despite her racing heart. The house creaked and groaned around her as she made her way through the dark corridors. Every sound made her freeze with terror, certain that Lord Aldrich would appear at any moment. But his snoring continued uninterrupted, and gradually, Elena reached the back door. The lock turned with a soft click that seemed thunderously loud in the silence. Elena held her breath, waiting for any sign that she had been heard. When nothing happened, she slowly opened the door and stepped out into the storm. The rain immediately soaked through her cloak and the wind nearly knocked her off her feet. Elena forced herself to move carefully across the muddy yard toward the garden shed where her bag was hidden. As she fumbled in the darkness for her hidden supplies, Elena's mind was filled with doubts. What if Marcus didn't come? What if this was all some elaborate trap? What if Lord Aldrich woke up and discovered her missing before she could get far enough away? But then she thought about the alternative. Staying in this house, enduring Lord Aldrich's increasing demands and cruelty, losing herself piece by piece until nothing remained of the girl her mother had raised with such love and care. That fate was worse than any risk she might face in the storm. Elena retrieved her bag and began the treacherous journey through the muddy streets toward the meeting place. The town was completely deserted, which was both a blessing and a source of anxiety. No one would see her leaving, but if something went wrong, there would also be no one to help her. The old oak tree stood at the intersection of two country roads just outside the town limits. It was a massive ancient tree that had weathered countless storms and seasons. Elena had chosen this spot with Marcus because it was easily recognizable even in bad weather, and it provided some shelter from the wind and rain. As Elena approached the tree, her heart sank. There was no sign of Marcus anywhere. She checked the area carefully, wondering if perhaps he was taking shelter somewhere nearby, but the road was completely empty in both directions. Elena huddled against the trunk of the oak tree, trying to stay as dry as possible while she waited. Minutes stretched by like hours. The cold rain seeped through her cloak and began to chill her to the bone. Worse than the physical discomfort was the growing fear that something had gone wrong. Had Marcus changed his mind? Had someone discovered their plan? Was he lying injured somewhere, unable to reach their meeting place? Each possibility seemed worse than the last. After what felt like an eternity, Elena heard the sound of hoofbeats on the muddy road. Her heart leaped with hope. But then she realized the sound was coming from the direction of town, not from the palace where Marcus should be approaching from. Elena pressed herself against the far side of the oak tree, trying to become invisible. The hoofbeats grew louder and more urgent. Someone was riding hard despite the terrible conditions. Through the rain and darkness, Elena saw a horse and rider appear on the road. Lightning flashed at just the right moment to illuminate the scene, and Elena's blood turned to ice. It was Lord Aldrich. Somehow he had discovered her absence. Perhaps the storm had woken him, or maybe he had chosen this night to check on her for reasons she didn't want to consider. Whatever the cause, he was now searching for her, and he was heading directly toward her hiding place. Elena realized with growing horror that Lord Aldrich was following the same route she had taken to reach the oak tree. He must have found her. Footprints in the mud, or perhaps he simply knew her well enough to guess where she might go. The horse slowed as it approached the intersection, and Elena heard Lord Aldrich's voice calling out over the storm. "Elena, I know you're here somewhere, you ungrateful little fool. Come out now, and your punishment won't be as severe as it's going to be if you make me search for you." Elena pressed herself harder against the tree, hardly daring to breathe. Lord Aldrich was so close she could hear his horse snorting and pawing at the ground. If he decided to circle the tree, he would find her immediately. "You have nowhere to go!" Lord Aldrich shouted. "No money, no friends, no family who would take you in. You'll be back within a day begging for my forgiveness. Save us both the trouble and come out now." Elena closed her eyes and prayed silently for Marcus to appear, for some miracle to save her from this nightmare. But the road remained empty except for Lord Aldrich and his increasingly agitated horse. Just when Elena thought all hope was lost, she heard different hoofbeats approaching from the opposite direction. Someone else was coming, riding just as hard as Lord Aldrich had been. Lightning flashed again, and Elena saw a second rider emerging from the storm. Even through the rain and darkness, she recognized the familiar silhouette. Marcus had come for her after all. Marcus rode through the storm with his heart pounding, cursing himself for being late. A problem with his horse's shoe had delayed his departure from the palace, and every minute that passed increased his fear that Elena would think he had abandoned her. As he approached the meeting place, Marcus saw another horse already there. Through the rain and lightning, he could make out a figure on horseback near the old oak tree. His first thought was relief that Elena had managed to escape safely, but then he realized the figure was too large to be Elena. The lightning flashed again, and Marcus recognized Lord Aldrich immediately. The man was shouting something into the storm, his voice filled with rage and authority. Marcus's blood ran cold as he understood what must have happened. Without hesitation, Marcus spurred his horse forward. He had no clear plan beyond getting between Lord Aldrich and Elena, wherever she might be hiding. As he approached the intersection, he called out through the rain, "Lord Aldrich, what brings you out in such terrible weather?" Lord Aldrich spun his horse around to face the newcomer, his face twisted with suspicion and anger. "Who dares question me?" he demanded. Then, recognizing Marcus's uniform beneath his rain-soaked cloak, his tone became slightly more controlled. "Ah, one of the royal guards. I'm searching for my wayward stepdaughter. The foolish girl has run off into this storm." Marcus kept his expression neutral, though inside he was calculating his options. "A dangerous night to be wandering alone," he observed. "Perhaps I can help you search." Lord Aldrich studied Marcus carefully. "And what brings a royal guard out here at this hour? Surely you're not on official duty in this weather." "Family business," Marcus replied smoothly. "I'm traveling north to visit my ailing aunt. When I saw you searching, I thought I should offer assistance." Elena, pressed against the far side of the oak tree, listened to this exchange with growing terror. She could hear the suspicion in Lord Aldrich's voice and feared that Marcus had walked into a trap. If Lord Aldrich connected Marcus to her disappearance, both of their lives would be in danger. "Have you seen a young woman on the roads tonight?" Lord Aldrich asked. "About 18 years old, dark hair, probably soaked to the skin and terrified." "By now?" Marcus shook his head convincingly. "I've seen no one else out in this storm. As you said, it would be dangerous for a young woman to be traveling alone in such conditions." Lord Aldrich's eyes narrowed. "Indeed it would be. Which is why I'm so eager to find her and bring her home safely." His tone made it clear that Elena's safety was the last thing on his mind. A sudden gust of wind caused the oak tree to creak ominously, and Elena had to grip the bark to keep from being blown away from her hiding place. The small movement caused some loose bark to fall to the ground with a soft rustling sound. Lord Aldrich's head snapped toward the tree immediately. What was that? Marcus's mind raced. He needed to create a distraction, something that would draw Lord Aldrich away from Elena's hiding place. Making a decision that would change everything, Marcus deliberately fell from his horse, crying out as if in pain. "My leg!" Marcus groaned, clutching at his right leg as he lay in the mud. "I think my horse stepped wrong in the mud." Lord Aldrich hesitated, torn between investigating the sound from the tree and dealing with the injured guard. His sense of self-preservation won out. Leaving an injured royal guard on the roadside would raise questions he didn't want to answer. "Are you badly hurt?" Lord Aldrich asked, though he made no move to dismount and help. Marcus continued his performance, groaning and trying unsuccessfully to stand. "I'm not sure. The pain is quite severe." While Lord Aldrich was distracted, Elena saw her chance. Moving as quietly as possible, she began to work her way around the tree, staying always on the side opposite from Lord Aldrich's position. If she could reach the road behind Marcus, she might be able to slip away while the two men were occupied with each other. "I really should continue my search," Lord Aldrich said, growing impatient with the injured guard. "My stepdaughter could be anywhere by now." "Of course," Marcus replied, still maintaining his act. "Though I wonder, in weather like this, wouldn't a frightened young woman seek the nearest shelter? Perhaps she's taken refuge in one of the abandoned buildings back toward town?" Elena realized what Marcus was doing. He was trying to send Lord Aldrich in the wrong direction, away from her actual escape route. The strategy worked. Lord Aldrich's expression brightened with new purpose. "You may be right," he said. "The old miller's cottage isn't far from here, and there are several other places she might hide." He turned his horse back toward town, then paused. "What about you? Can you make it back to town on your own?" "I'll manage," Marcus assured him. "My horse seems calm enough, and if I take my time, I should be able to ride despite the pain." Lord Aldrich nodded curtly and spurred his horse back toward town, eager to check the locations Marcus had suggested. As soon as he was out of sight, Marcus abandoned his pretense of injury and whistled softly. "Elena. It's safe now." Elena emerged from behind the oak tree, soaked and shivering but unharmed. Relief flooded her features as she saw Marcus standing, upright. "I thought you weren't coming," she said, her voice barely audible over the storm. And then, when he appeared— "I'm sorry I was late," Marcus replied, quickly retrieving his horse's reins. "We need to leave immediately. Lord Aldrich won't be fooled for long when he doesn't find you in those buildings." Marcus helped Elena mount his horse, then swung up behind her. The animal was strong enough to carry both of them, though the extra weight would slow their progress. "Where are we going?" Elena asked as they began to ride north. "There's an inn about 2 hours from here where we can wait out the storm and get dry clothes," Marcus explained. "After that, we'll continue to Millbrook as planned. But we'll need to take a different route now that Lord Aldrich knows you're missing." As they rode through the storm, Elena leaned back against Marcus's solid presence, feeling safer than she had in months. The rain continued to fall, washing away their tracks and providing cover for their escape. Behind them, Lord Aldrich would soon discover that the abandoned buildings were empty. When he did, his rage would know no bounds. But by then, Elena would be well on her way to freedom, protected by a man who had given up everything to save her. The storm that had seemed so threatening now felt like an ally, helping to hide their flight toward a new life and the promise of safety at last. 3 weeks later, Elena stood in the kitchen of Catherine's inn, kneading bread dough with steady, confident movements. The bruises on her arms had faded to yellow shadows, and for the first time in months, she slept peacefully through the night. Millbrook had welcomed her with the kind of warmth she had almost forgotten existed. Catherine, Marcus's sister, had taken one look at Elena's frightened face and immediately declared her part of the family. Catherine's husband, Thomas, was a gentleman who asked no uncomfortable questions and simply accepted Elena's presence as if she had always belonged there. The inn was a cozy place that served travelers on the main road between the capital and the northern provinces. Elena had quickly made herself indispensable, helping in the kitchen, tending to guests, and bringing an efficiency to the daily operations that Catherine greatly appreciated. "You have a gift for making people feel at home," Catherine had told her just the day before. "Several guests have commented on how much they enjoyed their stay, and I know it's partly because of your kindness toward them." Elena had found herself blossoming in this environment of respect and genuine care. For the first time since her mother's death, she felt like she had a purpose beyond mere survival. Marcus had stayed for 5 days to ensure Elena was safely settled before returning to the capital. His official story was that his aunt had recovered more quickly than expected, allowing him to cut his visit short. No one questioned his early return, and he resumed his duties as if nothing had happened. But everything had changed for Marcus. During those 5 days in Millbrook, he had seen Elena transform from a frightened, broken girl into someone who laughed easily and spoke her mind without fear. Watching her interact with Catherine's family, seeing her genuine smile return, had filled Marcus with a satisfaction deeper than any achievement in his military career. On his last morning in Millbrook, Marcus and Elena had walked together through the town market. Elena had marveled at being able to move freely, to speak to vendors without looking over her shoulder, to make choices about what she wanted to buy without fear of criticism or punishment. "I still can't believe this is real," she had confided to Marcus as they sat by the small river that ran through the town. "Sometimes I wake up expecting to be back in that house, with him standing over me, angry about something I've done wrong." "Those feelings will fade with time," Marcus had assured her. "You're safe now. Lord Aldrich has no power here, and even if he somehow tracked you down, Thomas has connections with honest officials who wouldn't be swayed by bribes or threats." Elena had nodded, but Marcus could see the lingering doubt in her eyes. "What about you?" she had asked. "Won't you be in danger when you return? What if he suspects you helped me?" Marcus had considered this question many times during their journey north. "I've been careful to leave no trail connecting us," he had said. "As far as anyone knows, you simply ran away during a storm, and I was visiting family at the same time. There's no evidence linking your disappearance to my absence." Now, 3 weeks later, Marcus's prediction had proven correct. Lord Aldrich had been furious when he discovered Elena was truly gone, but his inquiries had led nowhere. He had questioned servants at the palace, but no one remembered seeing Elena with any of the guards. He had even made subtle inquiries about Marcus, but the timeline didn't match, and Marcus's reputation for honesty was too strong to be easily questioned. Eventually, Lord Aldrich had been forced to accept that his stepdaughter had simply vanished into the night. He had spread word that she was mentally unstable and dangerous, claiming she had stolen money from him before disappearing. But without being able to produce evidence or locate Elena, there was little more he could do. Meanwhile, Elena's new life in Millbrook continued to flourish. She had discovered a talent for managing the inn's accounts, having learned basic mathematics from her mother years earlier. Thomas had been impressed by her quick grasp of the business side of their operation and had begun teaching her more advanced bookkeeping. "You could run your own business someday," Catherine had suggested. "Maybe a small shop or even an inn of your own." The idea seemed impossible to Elena, but she found herself daydreaming about it nonetheless. For so long, her future had seemed predetermined, a life of fear and servitude with no hope of escape. Now, suddenly, possibilities stretched out before her like roads on a map, each leading to adventures she had never dared imagine. One evening, as Elena was closing the inn's ledgers, a travel-worn messenger arrived with a letter addressed to her. Elena's hands trembled as she recognized Marcus's careful handwriting on the envelope. The letter was brief, but filled with warmth. "Dear Elena, I hope this letter finds you well and happy. Life at the palace continues much as before, though I find myself thinking often of Millbrook and the friends I made there. I have enclosed a small gift, some coins I've saved from my salary. Please use them to buy something that brings you joy. You deserve all the happiness in the world. Your friend always, Marcus." Elena found tears streaming down her cheeks as she read the letter. Inside the envelope were enough coins to buy new clothes, or supplies for a small business venture, or simply to save for whatever future she chose to build. But more valuable than the money was the knowledge that Marcus remembered her, that he considered her worth thinking about and caring for. After years of being told she was worthless, having someone believe in her future meant everything. Catherine found Elena crying over the letter and immediately became concerned. "What's wrong, dear? Bad news?" Elena shook her head, unable to speak for a moment. Finally, she managed to say, "Good news. Very good news." That night, Elena sat by her bedroom window, looking out at the peaceful streets of Millbrook. The moon was full, casting silver light over the rooftops and gardens. In the distance, she could hear the gentle sound of the river flowing toward the sea. For the first time in her life, Elena felt truly free. Free to make her own choices, to dream her own dreams, to become whoever she wanted to be. The girl who had once communicated only through silent pleas for help had found her voice and her strength. Marcus had kept his promise to save her, but in the end, Elena realized that saving herself had been just as important. She had found the courage to accept help when it was offered, to trust in the possibility of a better life, and to believe that she deserved happiness. As she prepared for bed, Elena whispered a prayer of gratitude for the royal guard who had abandoned his post to save her, and for the new life that stretched ahead of her, bright with promise and hope. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but Elena faced them without fear. She was free, she was safe, and she was finally home.